Hey everyone, John Lordan here. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Brainscratch Searchlight, this one being recorded for March 28th, 2018. Now, you know, in a lot of the cases that I cover here on the channel, I talk frequently about how sometimes the families of the missing person become frustrated with law enforcement and feeling like they're not doing enough in these cases. Well, this case is a little bit different. In this case, it seems like law enforcement is really going the extra mile, really trying to collaborate and call in resources from all over the place. It's definitely a lot different than many of the cases that we review here in that regard. In some aspects, we've got a young man, about 19 years old, college student that went missing, but this doesn't fit the typical profile we see in a lot of those cases. He didn't go missing after partying. He didn't go missing in the middle of the night. Definitely some differences for the types of cases that we usually see in this area on this channel. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and start on the case of James Martin Roberts, and this is a picture with him and his father, John. His father has been very active. He actually appeared on the Vanished podcast. Marissa Jones did a very good job, and John was interviewed, I think, primarily for the whole first episode. It's a 2-episode arc, and I've got links to that in the description box below. And I just want to give a shout out to the Vanished podcast and thank them for trying to get some more detail out of this case. They were also able to get investigators for the second part being interviewed and answering the viewers' questions, which was very informative and once again shows that trend that we don't really see all too often in these cases, where investigators are really going the extra mile and doing some things differently trying to solve this case. It's a bit refreshing to actually see that, quite honestly, from someone that reviews a lot of this type of information. But you can see here on the NamUs profile that they have it listed as James Roberts. He actually primarily goes by his middle name of Martin Roberts. So in a lot of areas, if you look into this case, you're going to see it typically listed as Martin Roberts. But the date he was last seen was April 21st, 2016. They don't have the time there, but from what his father has said, it was sometime between noon, possibly 12:30 in the afternoon. He disappeared at the age of 19. He would now be 21 years old. He is a white male. For height here, they have it listed at 5'7" to about 5'11". We'll get some clarification from his father in terms of some of that info. And for weight, 140 to 150 pounds. For the circumstances, he went missing from Boone, North Carolina. James Roberts was last seen walking away from the Apple Cart bus stop at the corner of River Street and Blowing Rock Road. And I've got a map here so we can just kind of check out that area real quick. And here we see River Street and Blowing Rock Road. There's a couple of bus stops in this area, so I'm not sure which one in particular. From what I understand, video surveillance actually caught him talking to someone here. I believe the authorities have tracked that person down. They do confirm that he was having a conversation with someone in this area. But if we get the satellite view going, just looks like a mix. You've got some college buildings around it. You've got a lot of homes over on this side, a few small businesses and a little bit of a strip mall there. But this is unfortunately the last place that he was seen. It's also interesting to note that he doesn't have his own transportation in this area. So another part of the mystery in terms of how he disappeared. For his physical characteristics, brown hair, it was shorter at the time that he went missing. You can see in some photos he grows it out. It gets a little shaggy, but not like it ever gets long. Facial hair, none at the time of his disappearance. He has blue eyes. He has 2 distinctive tattoos, one on his left forearm of mountains, and we're going to see a picture of that in a little bit, and a tattoo on his chest of a quote from a Bob Marley song. We're going to get some more details on that as well. Outside of that, no real other physical characteristics that we can note here. And clothing and accessories, he was wearing khaki shorts, a black 3/4 sleeve shirt made out of a windbreaker material, white socks, and gray shoes. The gray shoes were possibly New Balance. And he was last seen wearing a white visor-style hat. I'm wondering if it's the same one that they've got in the photos here, but even if it's not the same one, clearly a white visor style, something like that. Transportation methods, like I said, he didn't have a car at this location, so no transportation noted. Dental information and charting is available and entered. They've got DNA samples submitted. Tests are already complete. They also have fingerprint information. Typically, and this isn't a solid rule, but typically if they have fingerprint information, it might mean that he had a run-in with the law before. We'll get into some more possible details on that as well. Here in the images, you can see this photo of him with the tattoos. There are the mountains on his forearm, and there is the saying on his chest. And there's a little close-up here of the mountains as well. One of the great things about this being in NamUs is we have an actual case number, we have contact information. So I've heard some differing contact information. I'm putting the best info I can find in the description box below. If you happen to have any information on this case, please use that. And that also includes a way that you could submit tips anonymously. But if you do decide to call them into the police, it's always very helpful if you have the case number. Let's learn a little bit about Boone, North Carolina, where he went missing from. Boone is a town located in the Blue Ridge Mountains of western North Carolina, United States. Boone's population was 17,122 in 2010. It is the home of Appalachian State University. The town is named for famous American pioneer and explorer Daniel Boone. It is the largest community and the economic hub of the 7-county region of western North Carolina known as the High Country. So that's just a little bit about the area, and the college does come into play with this story a little bit. Here we can see that they've also got a listing for him over at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Typically they will go up to the age of 21 at the time that they went missing. So because he was 19 when he was missing, that's why they've decided to cover him on their website. An interesting note here is they're saying that James may be in need of medical attention, and I'm not quite certain what states that. From the information I reviewed, he didn't have any type of known conditions. Maybe it's an assumption that they're making about the state that he's in. Perhaps he is depressed for some reason or something along those lines. I don't know, but I haven't found any real solid information to back that up. In an interesting twist, a source that quite honestly never comes up on this channel, LinkedIn, we have a page here with a bunch of known facts, and the page is written by his father, John Roberts, and it was published only in January of 2018. Here are the facts as we know them. Name, of course, James Martin Roberts, 19 years old at the time of his disappearance, currently would be 21 years old. Last confirmed sighting, April 21st, 2016, noon. Location of the sighting, once again, the Applecart bus stop. It's close to the Appalachian State Convocation Center at 111 River Street, Boone, North Carolina. His residence at the time of the disappearance, he lived in an apartment off King Street in Boone. He attended App State the previous year as a full-time student. Something happened there, and I'm kind of hearing conflicting information. It seems to me, based on what his father is saying, that he might have gotten a little bit too much into the party scene, didn't focus on his schoolwork, his grades suffered. So essentially, they rolled him back to a community college level. Here it notes he was taking online classes in preparation for returning to App the next semester as a full-time student. So he was taking those classes, trying to get his GPA solid again, probably also trying to work with whatever happened to him the previous year. I've seen some other things saying he might have gotten a DUI the August before he disappeared. And also interesting to note, the time that he's disappearing is right around finals time. So Could this be that he was just stressed out, couldn't face his family in terms of telling them that he wanted to maybe not continue with school or something along those lines? We certainly have to consider those angles in this case. He had a deposit on an apartment in Boone for the fall 2016 semester, so once again, it looks like his intention was certainly to stay in the area and to try to get himself back into App State. Another interesting tidbit here that we didn't get from the NamUs profile, he had a small backpack with him. That was at the time that he was last sighted. The tattoo chest quote says, "Don't gain the world and lose your soul. Wisdom is better than silver or gold." So that's what's written on his chest. I tried to find pictures. I tried to zoom in every which way. I couldn't make it out, but thankfully his father has shared that information here. Medical condition. Martin is athletic with generally a slim build. Apparently he played soccer most of his life. No known serious health conditions or allergies, no known mental issues or drug addictions. So once again, I'm not really sure where that statement's coming from over at NCMEC. He did not have access to a personal vehicle or bicycle at the time of his disappearance. He did not take his cell phone, tablet, or laptop with him. And one of the things that I believe I heard on the Vanished podcast was it seems like his cell phone may have been broken. So he was primarily using his tablet for communications. The investigators talked about how they tried to use the tablet because he would have to jump onto Wi-Fi to use it, and they kind of traced his steps a little bit leading up to his disappearance. But of course, he doesn't have it with him, so there's no trail after that. In terms of the laptop, they did access the laptop. They said they really didn't find anything too interesting there outside of he did search on possibly joining the military. But the investigators have looked into that angle. They cannot find any records of him joining the military. But once again, if we're looking at this narrative that he might have not been happy in his life or wanted to make some type of big change, there's another aspect that kind of supports that. In terms of the electronic trail, there has been no activity to date on any of his email accounts or social media accounts. Possible destination. Martin did leave a vague note, but did not mention where he may be heading or what his intentions were. Martin does not have his passport with him. His family has the passport. Investigators confirmed they checked with the government to make sure he didn't get a replacement passport. He did not. The only thing he apparently had on him is a state identification card. They thought he might have an ATM card. His parents later found that in his clothes when they got his stuff out of the place that he was living. So literally just the state ID card, no real means of accessing finances at all. And obviously without a passport, not easy to leave the country, but certainly there's a couple of avenues he might be able to take if he wanted to jump across a border into Mexico in particular. Possibly Canada might still happen. You know, we used to have very open borders in both the north and the south of the U.S. here. I don't know if that's really still the case, but outside of that, Martin's family and friends love him and miss him tremendously. And John is also thanking Marissa Jones from the Vanish podcast. I also think that she did a really excellent job of interviewing these people. One thing I appreciate about a good interviewer, and Marissa shows this, is when they're able to ask a question and just get out of the way and let the information come from the person being interviewed. And she really did a good job with that. Moving on to journalnow.com. This is from April 26, 2016. So literally within days of him disappearing. You guys know that I like to kind of backtrack the media, see if we can find additional details or perspectives that might have changed along the investigation. With every notification that pops up on John Roberts' phone comes hope. He smiles every time someone posts a photo of Martin, the name his son goes by, some celebrating soccer victories with his childhood friends, with the Piedmont Triad Football Club, others with Martin's wry smile as he and his Tau Kappa Epsilon brothers pose in their bow ties. He couldn't imagine a closer bond with Martin, the only child at home. A sociable boy from the time he moved to Kernersville at 4 years old, Martin and his father bonded around sports, with John even coaching some of his teams. A standout soccer player at East Forsyth and with the Piedmont Triad Football Club, Martin could have played collegiately, but didn't want to go through the grind that goes with being a college athlete. Apparently, he still did enjoy playing just for fun. Martin's choice for college came down to 4 schools before he ultimately chose Appalachian State after falling in love with the area. That affection was apparent in the tattoo on his left forearm, a graphic in the shape of a triangle that represents his love for the high country. The quiet hiking trails and solitude of the Blue Ridge Parkway offered the refuge he sometimes craved amid his active social life. During Martin's first year in Boone, his father said that social life with his friends and fraternity events sometimes got more attention than it should have, which resulted in Martin taking a semester off before enrolling at Caldwell Community College in January. But things are heading in the right direction, John Roberts said, and Martin was set to return to ASU for the fall semester. Quote, "He had been home a couple weekends before and everything seemed to be great," John Roberts said. "We had a nice evening hanging out." During their last conversation on the afternoon of April 19th, there was nothing out of the ordinary, John said. No issues, problems, concerns, everything very positive and upbeat. We were supposed to talk again Wednesday. That's about something that we were working on, kind of a family issue. We were going to have a follow-up call Wednesday, but he didn't call, which was not unusual. I really have not seen any additional information about what this family issue is. And also worth noting, I know that we mentioned that a note was left behind. The contents of that letter have not been fully released. The only thing that the family investigators are willing to say is that it's clear that he wrote about his intention of taking a journey somewhere. He didn't say where he was going, but basically that he was leaving. And that they specifically do not get the sense that he was talking about harming himself or ending his life in some way. Martin's landlord asked his fraternity brothers to check on him, and that's when they discovered he was gone, leaving his cell phone and a note. There are rumors about the contents of that note, but John wanted to be clear it was not a suicide note. Quote, "The overall tone of the note was that he was going out. Whether short journey, long journey, we don't know. It was a note of travel or exploration compared to other things that may pop into people's minds when they hear note," he said. One of the other interesting aspects that came up in the Vanish podcast is John says that there was actually 2 versions of this note, almost like a version 1 draft that he had written and thrown in the trash, but they found. But it was still the same thing. It was basically giving them the same sense that he was talking about leaving. Martin was last seen Thursday near the Holmes Convocation Center at 12:30 p.m. after a possible sighting near Trout Lake along the Blue Ridge Parkway. That possible sighting in that area wouldn't have been uncommon, as it was often the trails and overlooks of the Blue Ridge Parkway where Martin went for solitude. Quote, "For all we know, he just went off on one of these short hikes to be alone and slipped and had some kind of accident and is hurt somewhere and needs assistance," John Roberts said. "It doesn't necessarily have to be something sinister or tragic that people's minds will race to." And keep in mind, this is just within a matter of days of him disappearing. And, we're now coming up on it being 2 years. I see where John is trying to keep his mindset. I see that he's trying to stay positive about this. The thing that concerns me is when people are going on a short hike to be alone, they're not likely to leave a letter behind. The letter throws all of this in a way different direction. One of the things that the Vanished podcast listeners asked Marissa to talk to the investigators about was, has a letter had a handwriting analysis to make sure that he actually wrote it? It doesn't seem like there has been a formal handwriting analysis, but his family seems very confident that it was written by him. From their untrained eye, let's say, they do believe that he wrote that letter. Moving on to WFMYnews2.com. Martin Roberts' parents, John and Abby, told WFMY News 2 that Martin left a note for them before he took off, saying only, "I'm leaving." John Roberts says it's hard for them to focus on anything else besides finding their only son. "It's a situation where our hearts are broken right now. There is no emotion left, or there is just an overflow of emotion," said Roberts. "You go from one moment where you just don't think you can feel anymore to the next moment being overcome with the pain or the suffering and the heartache. The situation is very unusual, very strange, very unexpected, said Roberts. Martin has never had any kind of situation where he just left and has been alone like this. We didn't see this coming. So I just wanted to share that with you because it was also published around the same time as the prior article, but the tone in both of those articles is very different. And I think he's kind of making the point here. You go some days where you're feeling kind of strong and confident, kind of like the previous article was, and then it could be not even a day. It could be a minute later, an hour later, things turn on you emotionally, and here you get a much stronger sense of the worry and suffering that this family is going through, wondering where he is. Moving over to HeraldCourier.com, we're going to start to get just a little bit of an idea here about how this investigation is really exploding and just reaching out in all kinds of different directions. The search for a missing college student from Boone, North Carolina has expanded to the Appalachian Trail near Damascus, Virginia. Quote, "We've been doing a lot of investigative steps, getting search warrants for cell phones and electronic devices," said Police Captain Andy LeBeau. We really been coming up with absolutely nothing. Police did receive a tip about a possible sighting on the Appalachian Trail, but it turned out not to be so. One of the things they talk about in the second episode of the podcast is his physical description just matches so many college students that it's tough because they're having sightings being called in from all over the place. They go and chase those down, and it's just someone that matches his description. In an interesting turn, they did also talk about the possibility that maybe he ran away to be with some type of underground community or something along those lines. And we have had cases before. There's one that really sticks out in my mind where we had someone that kind of ran off with almost this hippie commune artistic community, and we know that she was hiding there for a while. But what's strange to me about that possibility is if you look at this guy and you're hearing about how he's kind of an atypical college student, is he really going to be attracted to some of those kind of alternative lifestyle communities? My hunch would be right off the bat, probably not. And you're talking about his upbringing. He seems like a pretty straight-laced kid. I don't get the sense that those types of communities would necessarily attract him. And quite honestly, looking into joining the military, especially if he's kind of feeling lost, that would give him a lot of structure. And I don't know that those types of other communities have that type of structure in place either. So I don't know. I really struggle with that aspect. Of course, they have to consider it, and the investigators are being very open-minded about considering everything in this case. Boone police have focused their search on North Carolina, but have extended that into West Virginia, and Tennessee. He was last seen in Boone near Appalachian State University, LeBeau said of the Caldwell Community College student who previously attended ASU. "We caught him on surveillance camera and were able to establish that it was him. That is the last known sighting that we had. It just seems like he disappeared off the face of the earth." Moving over to hcpress.com, May 23rd, 2016. So we're just about a month away from where he disappeared. And the chief of police decides to write a public appeal letter to the community. "One factor in the investigation has prompted this letter to the community. We have learned that there are periods of time where Martin's whereabouts cannot be accounted for by his friends and roommates. This has led us to believe that there is a person in this community who has knowledge of Martin Roberts, but who may be hesitant to come forward. This person would have spent time with Martin during the weeks prior to Martin's disappearance. To this person, I want to speak with you. Our conversation can be private, anonymous, and discreet." And that was written by Dana Crawford, the chief of police. This is a very interesting turn, also covered on the Vanished podcast. And what you essentially have is Martin telling one group of his friends, "Oh, I'm going to go spend time with Group B." And he's telling Group B, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to be spending time with Group A." And he's lying, essentially, to make these pockets of time where no one knows where he is. Now, I think one of the first things we have to consider there is some type of secret life aspect. Is there potentially a drug addiction that is unknown that he is struggling with, or maybe just getting into, some type of other social structure that he's not proud of, that he doesn't want his friends to know about? One of the questions that came up on the Vanish podcast, could he be struggling with potentially being homosexual, trying to come out of the closet, something along those lines? I think those are all fair questions, in particular because of this behavior. And if it is something like a potential drug addiction or something like that, there's an element of danger that could be associated with these pockets of time that he is basically, disappearing in, especially if the person that he was spending that time with knew that he was doing that. Essentially, if someone wanted to harm him and they knew that he was always lying to his friends about whenever they were together, it would be very easy. It just there's something about the Blaze Bernstein case that keeps kind of nagging at the back of my head with this one. I don't know. There is no information out there to suggest that he is gay. Apparently, he had several relationships with women in the past. He's 19 years old. The possibility certainly exists that maybe he was just figuring that out. But from everything that's out there, there is no solid information to point in that direction. But it was important enough that the chief of police wrote this letter to the community. So it seems like they believe, and I kind of believe this as well, someone knows what he was doing during those pockets of time. If it was that he just wanted to go for a hike and be alone or something like that, he's not going to be lying to his friends about that. That could be something that would be very simple. Do you guys want to get together? No. I'm going to go just do a solo hike on that day or something like that. There's no reason for him to lie to those groups. Another interesting point that came up on the podcast was apparently before he disappeared, he pulled out of a few groups that he was part of online. One from his high school, and I believe one of freshmen at the college level also. And he literally quit those groups online. It's just really pointing to me that this is someone that was disconnecting and planning on leaving. I think the question with that is he talking about leaving just to disappear into another life of some kind, or is he really talking about leaving and the possibility of ending his life? I don't know. There's not enough about what he was going through available here. There are some articles where you can hear messages from his friends, but there's nothing that's really coming out saying this is someone that was struggling at an emotional level, or at least at a social level. He did go through a struggle with his academics. He was working on that. We know that he got a DUI, or at least there's information saying he potentially got a DUI. So we know that he was certainly going through some personal struggles, but I don't know that those were to the level of someone that is going to decide that, it's just not worth living anymore. So I really struggle with that as being the outcome of this case. Quite honestly, from where I'm sitting, the possibility that he wanted to disappear and figured out some way to do it seems kind of strong to me. And I don't know if this is a guy that wants to live off the land and he's just decided to go off into the forest, or if these pockets of time leading up to these weeks are him building up a relationship with someone that is helping him get away, possibly putting him up in a place, taking care of him, that kind of stuff. So I'd be very curious to know what these pockets of time were about. Another article at hcpress.com, just to give us a little more of an idea on the search efforts going on. June 2nd, 2016. In the past 2 days, authorities searched Trout Lake and the town of Boone's reservoir on Wrinkler's Creek. His body was not found. These places were known to be hangout spots of Roberts. Aside from ongoing searches in the wilderness, investigators have interviewed relatives, friends, and acquaintances. They've studied surveillance videos and inspected electronic communications. So you get a really good sense here about the ongoing effort, and we're not seeing the typical thing we see in these cases where the first 30 days run really hot in terms of resources, and then after that first month, everything just kind of dies off. The churn on this information keeps going well through the first year of him missing. Boone Police give update on missing student, case in its third month. And that's another thing that I really have to compliment this police department on, is keeping the public informed of what's going on with this case. They did a really solid job of that. I wish that these police departments would look at each other and learn to adopt good methods like this. But unfortunately, we just see different processes happen all over the country. The police and the family said that they know from the content of the letter that Martin was experiencing some challenges in life and may have wanted to escape from his circumstances. Boone Police Chief Dana Crawford said that, quote, "After a month, we began exhausting leads of the possibilities that were likely, so we began to look for the unlikely scenarios." Most recently, Boone Police Detective Kevin Wilson, who is the lead investigator for this case, spent 2 days with experienced investigators from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Quote, "While the NCMEC investigators were pleased with the amount of work that we have accomplished, they were able to come up with some new ideas and offer services that we do not have available on a local level. They will offer continual support to our investigation," said Detective Wilson. The Boone Police will continue to work hard for the Roberts family. 3 months must feel like an eternity not knowing where your child is at and if their son is okay, said Chief Crawford. HC Press, once again, doing really good coverage on this case. We're now jumping ahead a year from the date that he disappeared. This being the 1-year anniversary of Martin's disappearance, the Boone Police Department would like to recap the efforts taken to find Martin during the last 365 days. And quite honestly, this is the article that really impressed me with the level of effort that they have put into this, and also publicizing this information, getting it back out there. It really moves me, and I wish we saw this more. I wish we saw this more in other cases. Lots of people have called in possible tips and sightings. The search for Martin had led law enforcement to check tips as far as the Outer Banks and up into Virginia. The Boone Police Department has also worked with various agencies along the Appalachian Trail and as far away as Ohio. Many land searches have been conducted by both officers and citizens. The Boone Police Department utilized the North Catawba Fire and Rescue Dive Team during this investigation, including a rescue boat equipped with sonar to search bodies of water and trained rescue divers. The Appalachian State University Police Department has conducted several thorough searches of their entire campus and the areas surrounding. This includes all tunnels and rooftops. 2 separate teams of Specialized Human Remains Detection, or HRD, dog teams have been used during this investigation. The Boone Police Department has also utilized Dr. Lisa Briggs's HRD dog team. She owns a highly successful HRD dog named Layla. Layla is specially trained to search for human remains contained within bodies of water. She was used to search 2 bodies of water near the Blue Ridge Parkway. The North Carolina Highway Patrol provided the use of their pilots and specially equipped helicopter to search densely wooded areas. The helicopter was equipped with a FLIR camera that senses infrared radiation, typically from a heat source. So they were trying to use that to look for either human beings or campfires out in the wilderness. The Boone Police Department is a small agency and has reached out to many public safety partners. The Appalachian State University Police Department, the Watauga County Sheriff's Office, Blowing Rock Police Department, the NC State Bureau of Investigation and State Highway Patrol, the NC and U.S. Park Rangers, NCMEC, NamUs, and even the U.S. Secret Service. And then they have a special call out here that's really touching. The Roberts family has been crucial in reporting various tips and sightings that were not reported to law enforcement. The Roberts family have been a joy to work with during this tragic situation. And worth noting, in the first episode of the Vanish podcast, John Roberts also speaks very highly of the detectives working this case. And quite honestly, I think they deserve it, even though this case isn't cracked, because the amount of effort that's going into this is amazing. Hearing one of those investigators say that it was his only duty for several months kind of blew my mind. And I know that, in some places within this country, we can't have resources allocated like that for that long of a period of time, all the time. But it's nice to hear that in cases where it can happen, it does. Unfortunately, the Boone Police Department has not been able to uncover any confirmable or credible information that has allowed investigators to learn the whereabouts of Martin Roberts. They're saying they will continue to look for him until they find him. The Boone Police Department still continues to receive information and tips about Martin. These tips are treated as a high priority and are followed up on immediately. Over at journalnow.com, we get another note about what has happened at the 1-year anniversary. Family and friends will gather at Southminster Presbyterian Church in Gastonia at 6:30 p.m. today in observance of the last sighting of Martin Roberts. Besides speakers and a butterfly release, the family is encouraging everyone, attending or not, to donate a soccer ball to charity in honor of Robert's lifelong love of the game. And I just want to say, on behalf of my amazing supporters on Patreon and PayPal, I have found charityball.org, and that is primarily what they do, is specifically donate soccer balls all over the world. And it was pretty interesting. It's a really interesting read. Of course, I'm going to have a link to this charity in the description box down below. It was started by a 10-year-old. That's how amazing this is. A 10-year-old that happened to go to Africa and took his soccer ball and saw what it did to the community as he just shared it with these other children that were playing with balls of wrapped up plastic and all kinds of other stuff. So once again, in honor of this case, and thank you to my supporters, we will be making a donation to Charity Ball and making sure some more kids on this planet have soccer balls to play with. So one last twist on this. It looks like the investigation Discovery has been in the area for an episode of Disappeared, and they are working on airing that. If we take a look at the official Facebook page, John posted himself that they now have a date that it's going to air. It's going to be on Sunday, June 3rd at 9 p.m. on Disappeared. They're going to be covering the story of James Martin Roberts. I'll be very curious to see what they can dig up in terms of this investigation and hopefully shed some more light on what's going on with all this. One of the ways that you could send in tips is through this website, highcountrycrimestoppers.com. You can see their first item on the page is this case. You can submit a tip through this. You can do it anonymously. There is also a phone number, like I mentioned earlier in the video. You can check that out in the description box below, or you can call the police directly using the information in the description box below as well. A couple of threads of conversation going on, one over at Reddit on this case, and then, of course, Web Sleuths has some coverage on this case as well. And this is where it ends. It's inspiring to see the amount of work that has gone on here. It's heartbreaking in a way because you figure with that much going on that they should have found him, unless you really consider the possibility that he wanted to run away, that he wanted to go somewhere else. And maybe he had a resource for doing that with some person that he was meeting up with in those pockets of time that he was putting together for himself. This case to me really feels like the likelihood of him still being alive out there is pretty high. Of course, we are talking about a lot of terrain in this area. Maybe could it have been what his father assumed, that he went for a hike and had a slip and fall? Yes, I think there's certainly a consideration there. Could it be that he was so upset about what he was going through personally that he did want to stop living for some reason? Yes, I do think we have to consider that as well. However, in those cases, not always, obviously, but a lot of the time, we find the remains in a relatively close time frame. And here we are 2 years out. He still hasn't been located. I don't know. There's just something inside me that's saying that if there is a possibility that someone is out there, run away from their life for some reason, this is a very good possibility. But I know that's not the only consideration, and I want to hear about yours. Let's talk about it in the comments below. I also ask that we please remain respectful. You know how it is on this channel. There's always a high likelihood that some family member is going to come here and look through these comments as well. So I just ask, anything's fair game, but let's just be respectful about how we're talking to each other about that. I also wanted to put out there for any of Martin's family, if you want to be interviewed on the channel, if you want to clear up some things that I got incorrect, or there's new details that you want to get out there publicly, please feel free to contact me. You can email me directly at John, John, at lordanarts.com. Lordanarts, just like it's spelled in the channel name down below. Thank you so much for caring about these cases like I do. If you have friends in this area, please share this video with them. Let's keep exposure raised to this case, and let's see if there's something we can do to shake a tip loose and maybe, possibly, bring Martin Roberts home or let his family know what has happened here. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you back here tomorrow on the Lordan Arts channel.